Caitlin Clark has added pressure to the March 10th date for the WNBA CB talks and added pressure to the WNBPA to get a deal done.
The entire 2026 WNBA season was just saved by Caitlin Clark. I'm not exaggerating, either. The league was on the verge of collapse. The players couldn't get in. Game cancellations were being threatened by owners. Then, without warning, Clark intervened and took an unexpected action. However, before we discuss what she did, you must realize how dire things had become. For months, the Players Association and the WNBA had been at odds over a new collective bargaining deal. The owners desired minimal income sharing. Neither side was giving in to the players' demands for a larger share of the pie. We are discussing mature adults behaving like infants fighting over the last chicken nugget while billions of dollars are at stake. The deadline was March 10th, not March 15th or the end of April. If the season was to begin on schedule, then was the very last day to complete a deal.
They delivered a stark ultimatum to the players' union. A deal must be reached by March 10th if the season is to start on time, according to...
This is the reason that date was so important. Take a moment to consider this. Unrestricted free agents made up more than 80% of the league's players. There were absolutely no players on the rosters of the two new expansion teams, Portland and Toronto. Nothing. They had no players to put on the court despite having paid millions of dollars to join the league. The league had to conduct an expansion draft, finish free agency, hold the college draft, start training camps, and play preseason games between March 10th and the May 8th season opener. None of that is possible without a signed contract. If you don't know the salary cap, you can't sign players. The league as a whole was immobile. Additionally, the owners were not being cooperative. They made what is known as an exploding offer in the business world. It is dramatic, which is why it sounds dramatic. In essence, the owners warned the players' union that the offer would deteriorate each day they failed to sign the agreement. Become worse rather than staying the same.
Increases, but no revenue sharing movement. If you do not accept this deal by that day, every day following.
Take a moment to consider that. The salary cap is lowered by $100,000 on March 11th. Housing benefits end on March 12th, minimum wages are reduced on March 13th. The players waited every 24 hours. They suffered greater financial losses. The negotiation became a ticking time bomb because of the owners. This is where things start to look extremely bad. The goal of this tactic was to undermine the union from inside. Superstars with enormous endorsement agreements include A'ja Wilson and Caitlin Clark. They have the means to wait outside. However, the benchwarmers and role players rely on their WNBA salaries to cover their rent. They can't endure a protracted lockout. Thus, the proprietors were fully aware of what they were doing. They were attempting to incite rivalry among the players. The Union Executive Committee's seasoned members demanded 27.5% of total earnings. Absolutely not, the owners replied. They asserted that the league was predicting losses of $460 million and that they were not going to give players additional money while losing money.
I love that strategy. I used it with players all the time. You don't want to agree right now? Your next offer is lower.
Here's the twist. Nobody anticipated it. Because of Caitlin Clark, the players believed they had all the power. They believed that the owners would never take the chance of canceling a season with the biggest star in league history. They predicted that the wealthy would blink first. They made a mistake. The entire script was reversed by the owners. Caitlin Clark turned into a weapon aimed straight at the players rather than a shield for them. If you hold out and this season gets cancelled, you will be the ones who destroyed the Caitlin Clark era, the owners stated, glancing at the union. You, not us. And no player wants that kind of public relations disaster. Imagine being among the athletes who, because you wanted a few more percentage points, spoiled the most thrilling period in WNBA history. They would immediately be turned on by the fans. They would be held accountable by the sponsors. For years, the media would ridicule them. The proprietors were aware of this and made excellent use of it. But hold on, things get even messier. The proprietors made it quite evident that they were prepared to cancel everything and lock the doors. They weren't using bluffs. They gave them a pen and set up a symbolic tank on the players' union's front yard. Your wages will disappear if you don't sign the agreement. David Sampson, a former MLB executive, described how this operates. You have to follow through when you give an ultimatum, he stated. You permanently lose all credibility if you threaten repercussions and then back down. You will never be respected by the players again. Therefore, the owners were forced to mean every word they uttered.
Have to follow through. Because if your child, your partner, your parent, the people with whom you work, the people against whom you negotiate, the agents, if they all believe...
Caitlin Clark enters the picture at this point. Clark was watching the whole thing fall apart while everyone was yelling at each other across the negotiating table. She witnessed her teammates in a panic. She made the decision to take action on her own after realizing how quickly the season was passing. Everything was altered by what she did next. Caitlin Clark took up the phone and made a direct call to the WNBA commissioner. There were no middlemen, agents, or attorneys, just Clark informing the league headquarters that this absurdity had to end immediately. She informed them that while the athletes should be treated fairly, everyone would suffer if the season failed, including herself. She didn't stop there. Clark then made contact with important players' union members. She told them straight out that it was a losing plan to wait for numbers that the owners would never accept. She warned them that the arrangement would deteriorate the longer they waited. She also made it apparent that she would not watch helplessly as her sophomore season vanished due to obstinacy on both sides. This is the reason her intervention was so effective. The WNBA is currently worth more money because of Clark. She attracted millions of new admirers. Television ratings were completely destroyed by her. She convinced business sponsors to genuinely care about women's basketball. The league loses its greatest draw without her, so both sides must pay attention when she speaks. She is their golden goose, so the owners couldn't ignore her. Because she is their most valuable teammate, the players were unable to fire her. Sitting in the center, Clark had power over everyone, and she made excellent use of that power. She suggested a middle ground that neither party had thought of. She proposed a tiered approach that would raise player rewards as league income increases over time, rather than competing over gross revenue percentages. When the league generates more revenue, the players receive higher compensation. Easy, equitable, and truly doable. After considering Clark's suggestion, both parties came to the conclusion that it made sense. Because they were not forced to pay out large percentages while still losing money, the owners preferred it. Because their pay would increase as the league grew, the players enjoyed it. No one else had been astute enough to put it on the table. It was a win-win. The negotiations' tone abruptly changed. The two sides were back in the room, conversing rather than yelling, within 48 hours of Clark's intervention. The threats of an explosive offer subsided. Suddenly, the March 10th deadline seemed less like a doomsday clock and more like a real objective to strive for. This is the portion that truly demonstrates Clark's power. Several team owners acknowledged in private that Clark's involvement made them more open to negotiations. They didn't want to be the millionaires that disregarded their league's face. They didn't want their rejection of Caitlin Clark's peace offer to make headlines. Business would suffer greatly from that, and their reputations would suffer much more. Additionally, the players' union softened its position. The seasoned leaders who had been demanding 27.5% understood their teammates were going to stop supporting them. You pay attention to Caitlin Clark's advice to accept the agreement. She is no longer merely a novice. She embodies the entire brand. What does that mean for us now? Before March 10th, a new CBA is anticipated to be signed. The season will begin on schedule. Caitlin Clark will play her sophomore season as the lady who saved the WNBA from itself, and the expansion clubs will acquire their players. Click the subscribe button to help fund the organization if you like this analysis and would like to see more content revealing the true business behind professional sports.